If we assume your mind is divided into two parts, System 1 and System 2, with System 1 being the autonomous system and System 2 being you, the rational part of your mind that is able to think, but is able to think much slower compared to System 1. System 1 includes all the biases. System 1 includes all the controls, like your heart pumping. Now, the question arises, which one is in control? And for most of human existence, I think, we as humans think that System 2, we are in control. But there are several things now that might play out in favor of actually the other one being in control, System 1 being in control. The first one is, think about dreams. What is it you see when you're dreaming? You're seeing the dream world. But the question is, if you are seeing the dream world, then who creates the dream world? It's System 1. So if you now are able to experience the dream world, and if you are basically are able to act within this dream world, then you could argue that the one who creates the dream world is the one who actually controls the frame. And since I would argue that our mind, the rational part of our mind, System 2, is influenced by what we experience, and dreams are basically some part of our experience, even though not really, and we sometimes tend to forget about these. We also can get conscious in our dreams. And if we also get conscious in our dreams, we have a little bit more control of what actually happens. But still, we can only influence what happens to a certain degree. That's the first part. Now, the second part. Let's call it the override mode. Of course, we think we are in control all the time. But what now if we are very, very hungry? What if we have suddenly high amounts of fear? You can, for example, induce fear by giving people pure carbon dioxide, CO2, and letting them inhale it. And this creates basically instant fear. Now, one could argue that if System 2 basically is only in control a part of the time, and if System 1 has the control to override System 2 actually any time, then you could argue that System 2 again is actually in control and just letting us, System... I don't know if I just mentioned the two systems the other way around. So here again, you could argue that System 1 is actually the one in control, and System 2 is just the play figure. It's kind of like the parent, that you let the child play for a certain amount of time, but if it has to go to bed, it has to go to bed. And sleep, therefore, also very similar to the example of the parent and the bed. If you're just overslept, there is a certain point where your brain, System 1, just forces you, the rational part of your mind, to just sleep. This is often how car accidents happen, because the System 1 actually forces the System 2 just to sleep. And then this is called second sleep, or sleep for seconds, and then you run into something. But we want to discuss point 3. There have been studies where people had to decide something. This could be a very small decision or a rather big decision. Now, depending on the importance of the decision, now the scientists tried to determine the length of how long before the actual decision occurred to System 2. So System 2, the rational part of the mind, thought that a decision was made now. Now, what the scientists tried to do is try to see how long before or after you could see in the brain scans that a decision was made already. And it turns out up to 7 seconds before the rational part, the System 2, thought it made now a decision, you could basically predict the decision by analyzing the brain scans. Now, the conclusion. What does it all mean? I thought for quite some time now as of the system one, my automatic part of my mind, as my kind of secretary, as my kind of assistant. Because let's imagine you want to remember something. Then you can try to, with system two, the rational part of your mind, try to remember it very hard. But what is also quite efficient, and this is something I tried again and again and again, is to just try to remember it once and then just let your system one search for it. And then after sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it takes a few hours. But without further effort from my part of my mind, system one at some point randomly comes up with the answer. Like if you think about this actor you don't know the name of, you know how they look like, but you just can't remember the name. It lies almost under the tongue, is a saying in one of the languages. Then at some point in time, system one just comes up with the answer. But now, what if it is actually the other way around? What if system one is controlling us? What if we are basically just a video game character? Of course we think we can do our own decisions. Of course we think we can influence reality. But what if evolution basically designed the system two as basically outsourcing work from system one? What if we are basically employed engineers, employed thinkers who just work also together with system one, obviously, for the whole unit that is us, for the whole unit that also includes obviously the genes. When it comes to evolution now, there is the argument Richard Dawkins made, and it's not really an argument anymore, I guess, that the genes actually control over the long term what we do. Because if a certain gene, for example, activates, or not really activates, but is responsible for a trait that actually has evolutionary benefit, then this gene or this gene variant will remain in the population, in the bigger population of a certain animal or of certain apes or also of certain human species. And one of the most important questions we have asked ourselves as humans for quite a little bit of time is, why does the rational part of our mind even exist? And of course this is not a scientific answer. This is just much more a thought I had a few hours ago. What if we are basically never really in full control? Because system two, I mentioned already the argument. System one can override us basically at any point in time if we are too tired, I don't know what happened, or what could be the cause of the override signal from system one to system two. But what if, just like in the dream world, where system one at any point can basically interfere and frames us, gives us the frame in which we can act. It's basically the same thing as a company. A company does the same thing. A company employs people but controls the bigger frame. It gives them a salary and it basically owns the work of the people who are employed there. Also, it owns any patents people who work there come up with. And now, what if we, as System 2, are basically just employees of System 1? What if evolution had designed us, the rational parts of our minds, just to be an outsourced thinker for System 1?